move this to there, please?
Okay. You're all right with that there? Great filling in there, Chair. Thank you. Hopefully the coffee's outdoing the samosas, because Tim and I, and Claire, we got the graveyard session. So hopefully there's some really interesting stuff to build on Tim's presentation. My name's Keith Stopforth. I'm with my colleague Claire Shell today. We're both from BUPA. I'd like to tell you a little bit about our business, if I can start that first. So we're part of a business called BUPA Health and Wellbeing UK, which most people know as BUPA within the UK. Actually, we're a business that's something like 33 million customers across the world. We operate in 193 countries. And it's one of those businesses I sometimes describe as a bit like the Daewoo advert of years ago, the biggest car company you never heard of. Lots of people have heard of BUPA in the UK, but it's a much bigger organisation. We have about 3,500 employees, and we operate across the corporate, SME, and personal customer sector. And we can do everything for you in the healthcare sector, as you'd imagine, but also different products such as travel insurance, physio and sports medicine, and health assessments. So quite a broad range of products there that we deal with. So I'll tell you a bit about the project that we undertook 3 years ago in BUPA. And first of all, anybody who works here with systems, to go from 75 to just one was fairly ambitious. But that was our goal in terms of the organisation moving to our new operating system called Swift. We knew that the effective delivery of the project would better enable BUPA to meet the challenges of the future. So very much about delivering our new products and improved customer service relied on us moving to a better system platform. Every one of our employees was affected. On day one, 1,400 people had to be extremely competent, absolutely fully competent in using the new system. There were 45 different job roles within that, and it was the biggest single IT project in BUPA's history. What did our people say about the learning? Just watch this short film.
Expect the system to be different. That's why we're going through this project.
It is a computer system at the end of the day, but it will, obviously it's going to change BUPA's working, the way BUPA works completely.
I know that there's going to be a massive change, a brand new system, and if we don't get it working, we'll be in trouble.
BAS looked like a system that was used by a baddie in Superman 3, so it's good to have a system that's a bit more up to date.
The systems we have now were very good in the 1980s. They were at the forefront of what they were designed to do. Over the years, we've added to them, we've tried to build new user interfaces onto them to make them better, but they were at the point where they were becoming obsolete.
So that's just a few messages from the people that were actually involved in building and delivering and actually working with the system itself. Some more words here about the sort of culture. Already we'd had a system pilot, that is the new version of Swift, our new operating system, which hadn't gone too well. And our social grapevine around BUPA was already buzzing with, it isn't going to work, it's not that friendly, we're not really that comfortable with the new system. There's quite a negative attitude towards further phases of that system release. A lot of our more experienced employees, and we had an employee profile at the time where 20 years service wasn't unknown. So all those 75 systems, they'd lived through every single one of those being delivered in the organisation. And they were reluctant to change, but also frightened of losing their expertise. Nervous employees about would they still be able to do their job, and worried about the impact on their customers. And our employees are extremely close to our customers and really concerned about the service they were delivering. And finally, a wholesale reluctance around the use of e-learning for systems training. So people have got very used to training environments or turning up in a classroom to be showed for hours in terms of how to use a system, which wasn't really that interactive or that buzzy or whizzy. Fundamentally, our connection with the customer in BUPA is like no other. We're dealing with life. It's not about transactions. Here's some examples of some of the things that we do every day for our customers.
My wife has been suffering breast cancer for the last 4 years. 2 years ago it appeared in her spine and liver. She was admitted privately to Velindre Hospital in Cardiff. Unfortunately, she went downhill rapidly over the following 36 hours and died. While obviously I am devastated, I would like to express my appreciation for the way your staff have handled themselves while dealing with Julia over authorisation and payment for treatment over the whole 4 years. I know that the staff came over as caring about her illness, and there were never any problems regarding authorisation for treatment. I know that she felt it made her task of fighting the cancer easier, as there was no worry about authorisation, and she commented a number of times how nice and helpful your customer service staff were.
Bye now, speak to you soon, bye.
Okay, so all you need to do is speak to the GP.
I don't know whether it was a few of the same people dealing with Julia all the time. They're all different. But I would appreciate if you could pass my personal thanks to all involved.
I am writing to express grateful thanks for the swift professional handling of my husband's claims, especially during his last year. By acquiring docetaxel through BUPA, his life was extended by 6 months. These were lovely months. A real weight was lifted off our shoulders by the ease and caring way your team dealt with my inquiries. Our thanks.
So it's now over to Claire to talk a bit more about how we deliver the learning to our people.
Thanks, Keith. And as you can see with those 2 examples there in that particular video, how important it was that our people feel that they've got the right tools and knowledge available to them, especially when they're taking calls from people like those you've just seen there. Well, as Keith mentioned, this project really was a sizable one. Our solution was based on 5 key areas, and through this presentation I will take you through each one in a little more detail. In essence, they involve engaging our people, the development and production of e-learning, providing tailored learning paths, and backing this up with some classroom interventions, as well as testing our people's knowledge and understanding. All 5 of these elements were underpinned by an internal learning brand for this project, which we called Up to Speed. So why was employee engagement so important to us? I'm sure that many of you have all experienced a training session that gets hijacked and becomes a dealing with change session rather than the learning you had intended. We were very keen to avoid this situation. The pure scale and scope of this project meant that we wouldn't have the time or the energy. We needed focused learners that had a mindset for learning. So we grabbed responsibility for employee engagement and started our comms and engagement plan at least 2 months in advance of any of that specific training being delivered. The comms plan was made up of many elements. There were more videos like the 2 that we've just showed you. We provided in-depth manager briefing packs with cascade information for all of their teams. And sample e-learning was also developed that was fun and demonstrated the learning experience that they would go on to receive. We really wanted to inspire confidence that they would have everything they required post their training. This investment stood us and our people in good stead to receive their job-specific training. Choosing e-learning to support this project was a big decision for BUPA. Previously, we'd only really dipped our toe in the water in the use of e-learning. Our previous experience was mainly around delivering regulatory training. We did, however, find quite a few compelling reasons as to why this e-learning was the best way forward in this particular scenario. We'd previously had experience of user acceptance test systems during development phases, and these had been unreliable. Data would disappear, there'd still be lots of bugs in the system, and it often went down right at that critical moment. This was a concern to us, especially as we knew the system would still be in development while our training would be taking place. Best practice. This was also very important to us. The new system was being designed to work and be used in a particular way, and we needed our training approach to really reinforce that. And also, as you've seen, our people are so critical. We're a service organisation, and they were really quite concerned about this dramatic change. They were knowledge hungry, and they didn't want to wait for their scheduled classroom sessions to get their hands on the learning and what the new world was going to be like. So we wanted to provide them with some learning early on in the process. And we didn't want to be restricted by location, using particular PCs that had a test environment on, so we were looking for something that was web-based. The performance support element also was going to be important. We couldn't expect them to learn 100% of what they needed to do before, so they needed to have access to materials once the system had gone live. And also, we knew we'd be taking an 80-20 rule to the training, providing about 80% of the scenarios that they were likely to receive, and providing supporting material outside of that. And again, that needed to be accessible via a post-go live. So let's have a look at what our e-learning solution was made up of. Well, it's made up of a collection of different e-learning types. We designed the look and feel and mechanics of each of these different types well in advance of building any of the learning content. As you can see, there's quite a few on there. For example, key screen explorers and walkthroughs. These provided people with a real familiarisation of the screens that they were going to be interacting with, explaining what the fields were and how screens linked together. Show Me, Try It. It's a well-known simulation model. They formed quite a big part of what we were doing, but we also modernised those and added different elements to them. So, for example, you can see role-play simulations. Here we provided scripts as 2 people could work together and put in system and process together at the same time. Try It simulations were where we took away the Show Me mode, so we gave people an opportunity to learn using trial and error. And also a fun game around testing them, so they got points as they did well in particular scenarios. Other examples were Guide Me, so these were more performance support, so quick nuggets of information that they might need at point of need. Some of the communication modules that you saw earlier, and also Watch and Learns. These were, as the system was being developed, some of the functionality was released quite late, so we needed a way of getting the training out extremely quickly. We would do a recording of someone using the application with a voiceover that would give someone understanding of how to perform that particular task. Tutorials were also used to support some of the new products that we're rolling out during this project as well. In terms of developing the content, we sent the content to build our e-learning modules to our e-learning provider in batches of 3. A batch of 3 could be made up a mix of any combination of those things, and they would be returned to us fully completed within a 12-day cycle. That timeline also included an opportunity for us to get business and training team signed off. Over the course of the project, in about a 6 to 8 month period, about over 300 modules of these sorts of pieces of e-learning were produced. So as you can imagine, during the design period, it was really a conveyor belt of e-learning modules passing back between ourselves and the e-learning provider that we were working with. As Keith mentioned, there are about 40 or so job roles that were impacted, and each of these job roles were allocated a collection of those e-learning types that you've seen, and all of those together would help them get up to speed with this new system. We needed a clean way to present this learning to them, and this meant a learning management system. If I'm honest, personally, I'm not a great fan of learning management systems. Anything that makes accessing the learning quite challenging can sometimes be just a little bit annoying. So let's see what you think about yours. Raise your hand if you currently use an LMS within your organisation. Okay, quite a few of you. Keep your hand raised if you love your learning management system. Okay, good. Few of you. Now raise your hand if your learners love your LMS system. Okay, well these guys are obviously the ones to be talking to over coffee because they know something that I don't. So we did need a learning management system to support this particular project. We did have one in place, but I wasn't convinced it was going to make our learners or my life easier. So we went for one that was purely going to support the demands and needs of this particular project, and this is how it looked. So this is a screen grab from the learning management system. This is one of the learning pathways. So on the left-hand side, you can see that you've got e-learning. So this was your study content, if you like. So it was made up of the simulations, some walkthroughs from Key Screen Explorers. On the right-hand side was more of your performance support, so those just-in-time little snippets, pieces of information. Across the top, you'll see we've got some tabs. Basically, what we were able to do was group content around a particular subject matter. So if you were lots of pieces of learning around claims, they would all be grouped together. If you had lots of information about pre-authorising treatment, they would all be grouped together. The system knew who you were, so when you logged on, it recommended the correct learning centre for you. And we didn't restrict people. If they had handoff points with other departments, they wanted to look at some of the learning that they were receiving, they could go in and have a look at that learning centre as well. One of the wins, I think, from this particular project is you know that you've got your learning management system right if you don't get any feedback about it. So there weren't any negative comments about people not being able to access the learning, which was great. Classroom interventions. So we did offer classroom interventions, and these were really in order to tie everything together. These sessions were used to facilitate those e-learning modules that I've told you about, to help reinforce best practice and provide our people with the confidence that they needed to succeed at Go Live. On average, each person had approximately 3 days training, and these sessions were delivered at an off-site location, and for an intense period we were training around 200 people a day, 100 people in our Staines site and 100 people in our Manchester site. And the classes were organised depending on which learning path that you were undertaking. The last phase in our approach really was about testing knowledge. Now, we'd already said that people were quite nervous about moving on to this change, and some people might think it's a little bit strange to put them under more pressure to test, but it actually worked really well. And the reason behind it was it could demonstrate to them as a learner that they personally were ready and that they could do this. So it was giving them a lot of confidence, as well as providing the business with some hard stats around the competency of the people. We developed the tests in-house, so we used a tool and we used a framework with our external partner helped us. There was an 80% pass mark. We created over 70 tests, and the questions were made up of different things. So you had multiple choice, and there'll be a screen grab with hotspots, gap-fill questions as well. There was a resit policy, and all the tests were really job-specific, so they were really around what that person was going to be doing on a daily basis. I'm going to hand you back over to Keith to talk about why this project was successful.
Thanks, Claire. So, quite a few things here. We just tried to pull together some sort of summary points. First up is a strong partnership arrangement with our e-learning provider. It's great to see Virginia from Brightwave, who was our critical partner in developing that work in 2007 and since. E-learning could be built quickly. The system was changing rapidly. It was being developed very rapidly. There were lots of business pressures to get the system out there and working, and our people were pressuring us in terms of giving us the new piece of kit. So 3 module batches in every 12 days. Clearly established lines of responsibilities of the business, strong governance around the project, and making sure we worked extremely closely with the business readiness managers. So as the learning was ready, they could get their people ready to deliver it into the business. Employee engagement that Claire talked about, something we're really passionate about in BUPA, and making sure our people feel involved in the journey with any kind of training or learning. It was well worth the investment. A mix of e-learning types giving people a choice. The competency testing approach, and as I talked earlier, we're quite a cynical audience initially here, so building that confidence was really important. And on day one, we needed 100% confidence in our people to deal with some of both the challenging but also sometimes the exciting interactions we have with our customers. And finally, getting involved with our own internal systems people, make sure we were close to the testing so that we were confident as trainers and deliverers in terms of the product that was going out to the market. In summary, it was all about flexibility, being close to the business, and feedback absolutely being the breakfast of champions, making sure all the time we were listening to what people were telling us. Business benefits. Here's the stats. Didn't make them up. I think they were independently verified by our auditors as well, just for our legal colleagues here, Tim. But really, really impressive stats here. People told us that we knew that 99.6% of learners passed their assessment first time. Our target was 90, so we set the bar high already. Over 99% of people received and completed their training before go live, and high learner satisfaction with over 98% rating as either good or excellent. Our call centres achieved some of their best ever customer service stats. Typically it's around the 80 to 85% mark in terms of our measures. We achieved 99% service levels on day one, and in subsequent months achieved well into the 90s. We've grown our own internal e-learning design and delivery capability, and as Tim talked about growing the L&D capability, we've now got sign-off from the business to invest more within our e-learning capability within the business, and we're able to grow and bring more to the business, which they see as efficient, effective, and really sort of engaging learning. And finally, something we're really proud of, that we're an award winner in 2010 in the e-Learning Age Awards, along with Brightwave, as the best use of rapid e-learning content. That's our story, and now over to our chair, I think.
Thank you very much.
I think the workplace one is interesting. We have probably the opposite problem in that people use PCs every day. So almost like taking them to learn from PCs, we had to work quite hard to get them to do it. So it was an interesting sort of challenge there, really. To be honest, we haven't yet looked at the sort of outside of the work-based sort of environment, but what we do quite simply is we make the learning accessible from home PC. I appreciate there might be cultural challenges. If you switch off from work, you don't want to be learning at home, etc. But that's something we're able to do with our technology in terms of it's not just available throughout the workplace.
Yeah, it's always going to, it's a difficult situation, it's going to be a challenge. I remember when I started off at Lloyd's TSB, and Lloyd's we had lots of the systems, but the TSB network in those days didn't. And it was a challenge. I had a lot to do with work around getting people actually used to using the technology to start with, because they were only occasional users up to that point.
Yeah, this is the sort of cultural first.
Yes. And there we used to do things like, lunch and learn, they call them, but getting people just into the centre at some point, and just exploring it, even using the mouse. Lloyd's staff used mice, TSB staff never used to use mouse, and a lot of our courses had the mouse, and we had to do exercises around, some basic fundamental, but we got through that sort of communications piece around, yes, there is this new technology, Let's get you comfortable using that. The other thing, and I mentioned mobile learning in mine, and I've seen this a lot now, and I'm looking around, that a lot of people, like we said, I'll go straight to mobile. Mobile does seem to be coming into its own for those that aren't desk-based, who aren't familiar. A lot of people are more familiar with their telephone, their mobile phone, and maybe look at what sort of content you could deploy that way. It's probably going to be more performance support as opposed to learning per se. But if people have got their phones, then that might be a good way. And I know healthcare as a sector, especially in the States, has started to do a lot of things around mobile. Some of the providers we're talking to, I know they've got case studies, especially in the States, where hospitals are having short modules at the phone level. Yeah. So skipping the PC issue altogether. Yeah.
Thanks, Tim. I'm looking at one or two faces now and hoping for and expecting one or two challenging questions. What have you got for them?
Tried to structure the learning so that the majority of people would get their final classroom intervention as close to go live as we possibly could, but because of the numbers, obviously, then that was quite challenging. So we trained, as we said, 200 people a day, which meant that we could get as much closer to go live as we could. So their first two sessions might be, say, 3 or 4 weeks in advance of go live, and then their last session, we'd get through as many as we could in that last two to 3 weeks before we actually went live. But the great thing was that they had, the opportunity to continue to practice. They could access it from their desk. Some of them accessed it from home, just so that they were kind of reinforcing what they'd learned in that classroom session. I think it always being available was really key and helpful to them.
How long did it take you to get the e-learning in place before you started the training?
We kind of were still building some of the e-learning as the first training sessions were taking place, so it was a bit of a rolling cycle. There was enough of a criteria to kind of get people understanding the basics, and then we would add to it. So their first initial session, they would get, say, 50% of the training that they would need. The rest of it we'd keep growing and adding to their particular learning pathway as more functionality became available.
Okay. So what was I'm in a similar situation. I've got a
sure.
SAP rollout starting from June or thereabouts. And looking at your success, I'm thinking nearly enough emphasis on e-learning as at all. We've got heavily classroom backed up to e-learning. We should do that everywhere around. I'm just thinking there's anything we can just kind of mitigate the problem we've got. It depends how quickly you can deploy the e-learning. So I'm trying to get an idea. If you approach it from that direction, how early before you started training did you have to start developing the e-learning?
It took, in total, those 350 modules were developed over a 6-month period. So before we started actually generating content to populate the modules, we decided what the design and mechanics of each module would be. So we knew exactly how it would work and what content we would have to provide to sort of make it work within that particular sort of skin of e-learning, if you liked. So that was done early on, but then once that was done, you just had to provide the content, and it went through the conveyor belt wheel because we knew exactly what we was doing. So as soon as that bit took, a little bit of time, but as soon as that was done, then, as I said, 3 pieces returned complete within 12 days. It was quick.
I think the situation you're in, I'd probably turn it around and actually say, start doing the e-learning but treat it differently. So as I said, the word tune-up, of course, is because you've obviously got a lot of classroom content already written. No. Okay, as your trainers...
When the developers have finished with their bit.
That's true, yeah. But no, look at it that way. So you've got the classroom bit to start with. But then look at it as a fresher, because obviously in the classroom you're giving them a lot of information. Are they taking it all in? Later on, when they get back to the office, it's just more performance support type e-learning. So maybe it's not too late. It's just strategically put it in as after the classroom rather than prior. Yeah.
Question over here.
Not so much a question, but maybe just a comment to this gentleman's. I guess we were a large multinational deploying systems straight into a cast of thousands. So the early training intervention causes a huge challenge in that you have maybe 5,000 people to train. You can't wait until the last week. So one of the things we did was have something like on-the-floor proctors. So you train some subject matter experts. Do your classroom and your e-learning as a blend. You have people available the week or 2 weeks after
you just say which organisation you are?
Currently, Fibre, the previous organisation was Wyatt, so we deployed SAP to a cast of about 20,000 people.
Tall farmer. Gentleman back.
So we do a lot of subject matter expert work, Thompson Willis as well. But in your situation, were you actually developing the content using them as experts, or were they were all doing it themselves?
They were, yes.
So how did you ensure consistency in terms of the style in which they were developing the content, making sure it was in bite-sized chunks, all of that kind of stuff? That's kind of my first question. And then the kind of the second one is, you mentioned a whole list of expectations from the audience that you wanted to make sure you resonated with. How did you actually capture those expectations?
Okay, the first question, I mean, it did evolve. It was very much, as I said in my thing, it started off rough and ready, taking something that they already had, some slides, and then literally case by case talking to them about how they could make it better, sort of critiquing it very sensitively, I hope. But at the same time, as I mentioned, all the other PSLs, because that was the core network to start with, were looking, they were watching, and they started to give each other feedback. I thought, well, that was rather long. You spent 5 minutes on that slide. And of course, I knew 175 words is about 1.5 minutes of audio, stop after that point. But I thought, let them see it for themselves. So they started to get peer feedback from the other PSLs. And over time, in fact, we had another senior partner who was in London yesterday, and halfway through he said, that slide's too long, isn't it? Can we cut it now? Can we cut it now? So he was guessing it, and he's got another 2 sessions in a couple of weeks' time, so I'm going to be better prepared. I'm going to start chunking it down. And the other question, how we knew it worked, we did more detailed analysis during the first few projects, and we did very similar questions that you asked, which was, was it fit for purpose? Did they enjoy the method? And most people didn't think there was anything wrong with the method. And we looked at, did you get the learning? To just standard evaluation. And the feedback was from, they're mostly trainees, so they're quite IT literate in some ways. So just was general feedback. But I think for me, the proof of the pudding actually came from the fact that other partners saw what was being done, saw it. And anecdotal, I mean, I'm doing a lot more work next year on this coming year, but there's so much anecdotal that it started to permeate through the other practice groups, and other partners were saying, I want some of that. Yeah.
Well, I guess that gives me the last question. I'd like to roll 2 awkward questions into one, if I may, because I think that 99% service levels in call centres on day one. I mean, that's a pretty powerful performance measure. And I also heard you speaking about the importance of winning trust as an L&D supplier within the organisation, the trust of stakeholders. How did you answer the naysayers who said, but that wasn't because of learning and development, was it? And how do you win that trust?
I can't remember there were any naysayers in terms of saying that, and I think that's not because we didn't listen to them, or there wasn't, we didn't invite them to challenge that. But I think the key to this whole project was all of the stakeholders and the involvement. So they could see it was, really, it wasn't just down to L&D, it was about management involvement, it was about engagement with the people, it was about, somebody talked about floor walkers, I think, before on day 1 and right through to day 21 and things like that. So it was a real team effort there, but nobody actually came back to us and said, well, it wasn't just down to L&D. I think genuinely that, because we all felt part of it in some way, and the key thing that was important to us, that it wasn't about who delivered that, but actually the result that was delivered at the end of the day. Our first task with this was, don't disrupt customer service levels, in fact, make them better, and we achieved that.
Anything to add besides the nod?
Humility. I mean, I was coming into the world of law without a legal background, working with fantastic people. I mean, Audrey Williams, our HR, she's on Breakfast News every day of the week talking about something. So these are really high-caliber people, and I thought, I don't know anything about law. So as I said, I just started. They knew what they wanted. They had their content. It was just softly, as I said, humility. But when I felt that they were seeing the results they wanted, it was return on their expectations more than any glorified evaluation model. At that point, I thought, okay, let's start pushing it, and then sort of this term finesse, and then enabling them to say, yeah, that was better. I can see that now. I've seen it as I thought it should be. That was okay, but you've made it a tiny bit better. And it was a very slow sea change over sort of like 18 months.
Claire Shells, Keith Stopforth, Tim Druitt, thank you very much. Another generous break now, and the next sessions are at 3 o'clock. Thank you.